Hey, everybody, it's Kevin Henry, editor-in-chief for drbicuspid.com. Thanks so much for joining us for another podcast. We're going to talk about airway, and I'm excited to welcome on Dr. Don Anderson to do just that. Dr. Anderson, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. So glad you took time out of your busy schedule to join us. And before we dive into the topic, I'd love for our audience to just know a little bit more about you.
Well, I'm a general dentist here in Fresno, California, and I'm devoting my practice now to airway management rather than just general dentistry itself. It's a transformation that's occurred over the past year and a half, and we've really enjoyed that transformation.
So why the transformation? I'm curious. What got you so excited about this?
Well, I started my journey over at Spear Education, and I started listening to Dr. Jeff Rouse and Dr. Jonathan Ford and Dr. Jamison Spencer, excuse me. And all three of those guys had a unique take on airway and the fact that, having had OSA my entire life, well, at least in the last 20 years or so, it seems like it was not only pertinent to myself, but it was also pertinent to my patient pool. They kind of aged along with me, and they developed all the OSA problems. So I wanted to be able to help them more, and it just seemed like a natural, transition for me to be able to join the end of that.
Well, I'm excited to bust some myths with you in this podcast. And I know the first one has to deal with obstructive sleep apnea. And I'm curious, from your point of view, what's the biggest myth there is out there about airways and OSA?
I think a lot of people don't understand when the physicians tell them that they're actually healthy, that they're not really healthy. They still have airway obstructions. They're still dealing with breathing issues. They're still having problems. They just aren't qualified into the medical arena as being truly diseased to the OSA standards.
And I know that some people, like the medical doctor, will say, well, your sleep test is normal. Everything is fine. And I'm curious, what role do you see that the dentist maybe has in busting that?
Well, I think we deal with the arena of upper airway respiratory syndrome a lot more efficiently than the medical side of the equation. The reality is we're trying to get people before they get into full-blown OSA, before they get into severe OSA, and actually be able to help them get out of those problems using, mandibular advancement devices and other assorted devices. Basically, we're trying to kick the can down the road a little bit further for most people before they get to that, heavy duty state.
And I'm curious, before we bust another myth here, I'm really curious because with sleep apnea, is that something that you think the dental practice can diagnose first before the medical doctor, or is it a chicken and egg thing? I'm really curious your thoughts on that.
I think in a lot of cases, we're seeing the worn dentition and the broken teeth and the clenching, grinding issues long before the MDs ever get a hold of that. A lot of times the patients think that, hey, I'm just stressed out. It's not really stress. It's a lot of times stress is part of it, but it's not the predominating factor. What they're happening is when they're, sleeping at night, they're sitting there clenching and grinding because they can't breathe. They're is basically trying to get them into a position where you can actually breathe and survive. So the body's trying to help itself actually not die in their sleep. So by sitting there and actually getting people out of that whole airway bruxism pattern, I guess, we're actually helping people actually be able to live better. We don't want patients to end up with hypertension. We don't want patients to end up with diabetes. We don't want patients to end up with all the other sequelae that can happen down the road if they're not breathing.
And is this something that you've seen maybe in your practice or others where the hygienists are the first to notice something during that 6-month recall appointment? Or when do you kind of have that knowledge that maybe we should talk to the patient about this?
Yeah, I think the hygiene appointments are important. The reality is they're getting an opportunity to spend time with that patient and really look at their mouth and really be able to help diagnose, not necessarily diagnose itself, but to at least evaluate the opportunity for, that there could be something wrong here. All of a sudden you're seeing scalp tongues, you're seeing symptomologies that would preclude themselves to actually having OSA. So by the time I or any other dentist actually enter the operatory, the hygienist has the unique opportunity of being able to talk to them about what their experiences are. Are they feeling groggy during the daytime? Are they having all sorts of driving issues? Maybe, maybe trying to fall asleep at a stoplight. Odd sort of things like that can actually start to be a sequelae of the whole sleep apnea world.
And I want to get to that third myth that we wanted to bust with this podcast. And it revolves around kids and orthodontics. And I'm curious, What do you want people?
I want people to know that we can actually intervene a lot earlier to actually help people not develop sleep apnea. It's one of those things where if we can expand palates when kids are young, when they're beginning to snore and their mom and dad are, they can't figure out why the kid's clenching and grinding their teeth at the age of 5 because they're not really supposed to be stressed at the age of 5. And the reality is it's usually an airway issue. They're usually just trying to breathe, and nobody ever knows, why they're doing that. So mom and dad start to ask the pediatricians, and the pediatricians sometimes are well versed in it, sometimes they're not. The pediatric dentists often can intervene and say, hey, this is not a normal occurrence. This is an opportunity to actually help Johnny, Janie, or whatever the, name the child is, to actually get proper health care before it starts to actually impact their growth patterns. If we're getting to the point where they're 7, 8, 9, 10, and we haven't intervened at that point, we're actually making the kids potentially shorter by not actually addressing their human growth hormones being, dispensed during the nighttime by our brains. So we actually want the kids to actually have their full growth. We want the kids to develop fully. We don't want kids to have all these problems down the road. If we can intervene now, why wouldn't we want to do that before they become adults? Anything we can do to actually make, kids healthier is a win-win for everybody.
And are some of the signs maybe that they see in the dental practice the same for kids as they are for adults with some of the clenching and the grinding?
Yeah, sometimes it is the clenching grinding. Sometimes it's also just the fact that mom and dad are mentioning, boy, they're snoring a lot, or they're always breathing through the mouth, and we don't know why they won't close their mouth so they can breathe through the nose. And those are usually signs that there's something going on. It could be that they're having enlarged tonsils. It could be that they're having sinus issues. Could just be that, they're having an underdeveloped jaw and they may need some more expansion. These are all things that, we can see in 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 9-year-olds. And if we can intervene, we absolutely should, as long as, we have the medical colleagues helping us and, working with us to help alleviate some of these situations.
I mentioned the hygienist a minute ago, maybe noticing some of the signs with the check. How important is it for the assistants and other members of the team to be able to talk about this just as much as maybe you or other dentists might?
I think it's a trust factor. Usually the patients will trust the doctor, but it's one of those things where they may not always understand what we say when we say it. The reality is these are people that are a little bit more their level to explain things that maybe Dr. So-and-so says, well, blah, 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 at a high level. And all of a sudden, they wait until the doctor leaves the room, and then the staff member can actually kind of interpret for us what we actually tried to say to them. So that way they're not sitting there going like, I know they said something that was important, but I have no idea what they just said.
Yeah.
So it's important for the hygienists and the assistants to really be involved, interacting and involved with that whole process. Same with the front office. They actually need to be able to know enough when, hey, Mrs. Jones goes up to the front lobby and they have a question about the back office staff. Maybe they didn't feel comfortable asking the back office staff. It's important to have the whole team involved in the process rather than just having the doctor involved.
The last question for you, sir. If somebody's thinking about, is airway management something I should be doing in my practice, what advice would you give to them?
Absolutely. I would say there's so many people out there that would really benefit from us intervening early. So that way, we don't want those patients to have the one dentition problems where they're breaking teeth left and right. No doctor wants to sit there fixing their own work, trying to figure out why it's not holding up. We always want to do the best we can for our patients, and we want that work to last 20 years if we can possibly get it. The reality is, if their airway's not helping us, then all of a sudden fillings are breaking prematurely, crowns are chipping, all sorts of other problems are developing. Why wouldn't we as healthcare professionals want the very best for our patients? And by intervening early in the airway concept, we're actually dealing with a skeleton. We're actually getting people to the point where they're actually healthier before they can even get to us.
Dr. Anderson, I've enjoyed the chat, and I'm sure there may be some questions bubbling in our listeners' minds. And I'm curious if somebody wants to reach out to you, what's a good way to do that?
Probably through my website, or you can do the email. My website is donaldandersondds.com, and my office email is dsanderson@gmail.com. They're certainly welcome to reach out and love to have an interaction with them.
Well, we're going to put that in the show notes, so it's really easy for you to find. If you're listening to this, if you're watching this on drbicuspid.com, guess what? It's in the article. So easy for you to find out Dr. Anderson's contact information and reach out to learn more. So, Dr. Anderson, I appreciate you busting some myths with me today. And
Happy
best of luck to you, sir. Really appreciate what you do.
Happy to do so, and thank you for helping to get the word out. I want to have a healthier, not only America, but a healthier world that we can all interact with.
Love that. And absolutely honored to do that. And thanks to all of you for listening to this episode of the drbicuspid.com podcast. Hey, it's a great thing, right? Healthier patients, healthier world. Why not? Till next time, it's Kevin Henry, editor-in-chief for Dr. Bicuspid, signing off. And as always, wishing you nothing but success ahead.
Have a wonderful day.